Hey there, Ryan here. Now in this video, I'm going to show you something really cool. It's a little crazy, very Maya dependent, although I'm sure there's plugins and things of that nature in other programs. We're just going to be using the mesh transfer attributes option here. And what we're going to be able to do is we're going to take all the crazy, I always forget my navigation in these different softwares. So you take all the crazy of this, the triangulation, and you turn that into beautiful quadded out geometry with the same dang UVs. How crazy is that? All right, it all starts, let's just close that out. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to get rid of all these things and just start this scene totally fresh, or sort of fresh. It's going to have the pair of genes in there. So make sure that from the OBJ that you exported last time, you've got that, or just to be kind of uber clear, let's clear that out, or let's just create a brand new scene. Well, everything's there, so we will go File, and inside of Maya, we're going to import. I'm going to import, in this particular case, I'm going to import the single object. You can probably import the multiple object. I'm not sure if it makes a difference. And you do this once, twice. If you run into a problem, you just go from single to multiple, okay? It's not something I want you to ever get yourself kind of caught up on because the software changes this kind of stuff frequently, annoyingly. All right, so let's go in and let's just say multiple object. That's the one that we exported in the previous video. Let it do its thing. Voila, comes in here. All right, that's the direct from Marvelous Designer high resolution with a particle distance of 5. If we select that guy, we are looking at a lot of polygons. All right, now let's just rename that. And we'll say high res. Okay. Notice it's got its UV pattern over here. That's cool. Great. Now we're going to go over into Marvelous Designer, and we're going to make sure that we export something different than we've exported before. The key to this process is to actually get the 3D clothing into its 2D pattern. Now, before we do this next step, and I'm being slow and cautious because I want to impress upon you, you can go south very quickly here. Save your file. If you haven't saved your file, it's all on you. Okay, what happens next? Save your file. Stop, pause, save the file. All right, then we're going to come in here and we're going to go to this Reset 2D Arrangement. And we're going to reset the 2D arrangement inside the viewport here. Okay, this is really cool. This is going to give me a lot of power and potential. Okay, and we're going to come in here and we're going to export this as it exists right here in this 2D arrangement. Okay, but this is why I wanted to be sure that you come in and you save it before this, because otherwise you're going to have to manually go through and do a whole bunch of work to make this kind of adjust back in there. All right, I just saved this out as an OBJ, but we still have to choose the options. Kill the avatar. Okay, you can do single object, multiple object. We're not going to weld it. If you weld it, it will literally look like this stitching looks. It'll weld all of these pieces together. So you want that to be unwelded. Multiple objects is fine. We want the UVs, and we want to use the same scale that we used for everything else. So if you use millimeters, use millimeters. If you use centimeters, use centimeters. Okay, hit OK. We want thin. We don't want thick, because we just want that almost that 2D plane with no depth to it. Okay, let it do its thing. Great, that's exported. Now we have an intermediary program that's going to help us. Okay, and you can kind of see me already working with this here. So let's just come in, and I'm going to, for the sake of argument, I'm just going to delete this. So we start as fresh as possible for you. I've got all these other OBJs from before, but I'm going to select a polymesh star. I'm going to import this 2D pattern reset that I have here. And I'm going to, clean it up as necessary, not a big deal. And there you go. Now, this is about 78,000 polygons. It's got a lot of stuff going on, but I also have the UVs. There you go. Just check that these are the same UVs. It'll be upside down because that's just the way ZBrush works. So you can ignore that. It's not a big deal. Okay, but now the trick is we're going to redo the topology here. You're going to redo this and quad this out, and then we're going to conform this and shrink wrap this to the 3D shape. Bear with me. Step number 1, 2, 3, whichever of this process, you come into Z tool, geometry. You go into Z remesher, not Tessmate, Z remesher. Okay, and if you hit freeze border, which is one option, it's going to automatically decide how many polygons this needs to be. The general idea is we want this to, we don't want the border to change. So let's just turn this off and let's hit a Z remesh of 5 and see what we get. That's the default anyways. I already know it's going to take more, but let's go turn polyframe off and I'll just Control Z. Okay, so we're getting a little clipping on the belt and a little clipping in the fly. So I'm going to increase this to 16 because that's the number that kind of worked for me, and hit Z remesh. Okay, you barely even know it did anything. In fact, I can't see it change at all, but if I come in, I can look and see a much lower resolution, 16,000 polygons. I'm going to undo that though, and I'm going to come over here and click the freeze border on there, and you'll see it's much higher than 16,000 because it goes, it tries to keep it very safe, and it wants to make sure that it conforms to that as much as possible. See, it actually is, 45,000. Now, when we do this process, we're operating inside of Maya, and we're using Maya to alter the geometry. And if you've ever dealt with Maya and thousands and millions of polygons, the difference between 16,000 and 45,000, it's worth taking a pause and seeing if maybe we can get that a little lower, right? And in this particular case, it's worth it to me, especially on the machine that I'm doing this tutorial on. All right, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to export this, and one of the things that you got to know right off the bat is it totally killed the UVs, because that's just Z remesher, just kills the UVs. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, this is one I already have, so I'm just using this as kind of a template. The 2D pattern reset remeshed. I'm going to save that out. You can call it whatever you want. Just don't call it late for dinner. Okay. Sorry. Now, here's where all of the work is. So we're going to come into File, Import. We're going to import the 2D pattern, the original, the one that's got the UVs, right? So if we come in here and we select this, see the UV setup, and let's name this 2D pattern. All right, now we're going to come in and we're going to import the remeshed as well. 2D pattern remesh. Cool. Now, when I select the pattern, notice there's no UVs. When I select the original from Marvelous Designer, I have UVs. Okay, but one of the things that you'll notice is that the 2D remesh and the 2D pattern they share the exact same world space, the position of them all in space. So here's the cool part. You got to select the geometry. So you select this little bit of the original, and then you select this little bit of the remesh. You go into Mesh, Transfer Attributes. Come on. Transfer Attributes. We're going to say, in fact, let's just undo in case it did something funky. Yeah, perform that. Let's just undo that. Just don't want to screw with anything. Okay. I'm going to turn these off. And all I want to do is convert the current UV set. And I want to do that in world space. Okay. So again, I'm converting UV set, the current one, which is the first one I selected. And I'm going to do that in world space because look, they're right on top of each other. So the UVs of one, I'm going to transfer to the other through their world space. Cool. Now I'm going to hit transfer. That's pretty cool. Deselect, and then let's just select the 2D remesh, and what do you know? We have UVs laid out beautifully here. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And let's just come in here, and you can delete or you can hide that original. We don't really need that anymore. Now what we need to do is we need to find a way to get this pattern and be able to transfer this pattern, or this geometry I should say, and shrink wrap it over here into this 3D shape. Now the really cool thing about all of this is this A and B, they have the exact same UVs. And when they have the exact same UVs, then that's one of the spaces, quote unquote spaces, that we can use to transform or transpose the geometry. Okay, this is just beautiful. I love this. All right, so the way that we do this is we come in and we say the source object is the first one we select, and then we come in and we select the one that we want to transfer attributes to, and then we'll come into mesh and we'll say option box. Make sure you hit the option box, and we're going to say no, don't transfer the UVs, but we are going to transfer. Why don't we transfer the position and the normal? And we're going to do this within the UV space, not the world space, not local, not component, within UV space. Then we're going to hit transfer. We're going to sit back. It happens pretty fast because it's 16,000 polygons. And did it work? Let's hide the high res. There you go. And voila, there's my genes. Pretty cool, huh? Let's just frame that. It got the UVs, I got this stuff all lined up, and it all works within that world space, which is just awesome. So if we wanted to get this immediately into the program, we'd come in and we got to go in and usually unlock, especially in Maya, you got to unlock the normals. Then you got to come in and soften the normals. Okay, and then just confirm that things are softened. Yeah, that looks pretty sweet. Looks like we're okay. All right, now we can export this as, let's say we've smoothed this out, so let's export this as an FBX. I'm going to come in here. There you go. And we will say genes, low res. Perfect. All right, now we're going to go into Marmoset, bring that in. And, we haven't done anything with the material or the textures or any of that good stuff, but let's just load this stuff in and see what kind of trouble we can get into. We're going to import a model. Take ourselves into work, Marvelous Designer, and we want the genes low res FBX. Now, wise, very wise when you do this. We're using centimeters out of Marvelous Designer. I know I'm using centimeters out of Marvelous Designer, so why don't we make sure that we're using that kind of system here. So we got some genes. Nothing's been baked. I haven't brought the high res in or any of that stuff that we would kind of pull in from Maya or Marvelous Designer. Why don't we do that now? So we'll bring in the high res, and I think we were doing the multiple objects. Cool. Okay, we're going to create a bake setup. And that's all the multiple objects. Let's bring that in. So that's going to be my high. That's going to be my low. I'm going to come into my baker and let's get our settings established. We're going to be fine, I think, with that. We're going to use the hidden, so why don't we hide that and show the low res. There you go. And let's just do normals right now. I don't need to do too much of anything else. And bake this. Okay, we just need to bake this in somewhere and say yes, normals, or bake. Okay, let's come in, throw that on there, and then let's grab that map. Throw that on there, and then let's go into our metalness. I'm going to set this to a specular. There you go, and I'm going to change the intensity of that a little bit. And let's increase the roughness of that since we're dealing with some genes. And there you go. That's going to be enough for us to kind of get a sense out of this. Not too shabby. And if you're looking at the polygon count, still pretty low, right, at the scheme of things. About 16,000 polygons for those pants. We could probably, not probably, we could definitely go lower. And, you know, maybe now what we could do is come back into Maya now that we have this here. And we have the UVs already signed up. So as long as we're not affecting the edges, it's conceivable that we could just come in and start to grab actual loops like this and just start deleting things. Okay, and as we do that, of course, let's zoom out of that a little bit. The UVs are just going to, you know, update, handle themselves, but we're going to be able to get in and reduce the polygon count of this while in Marmoset having the high res transfer all the stuff that we might be missing. Another technique that we can do is actually inside of ZBrush, and what we will do is we'll decimate this. We'll use the Decimate Master plugin, and we'll be able to keep all of these beautiful, wonderful UVs that we have set up here. All right, so the key thing is we will, let's turn that off. Let's go into Z plugin, open up Decimation Master, and we click Keep UVs, and you gotta click that first. Then you pre-process the current, and you have to click Keep UV so that those are part of the pre-processing. All right, and so right now we're at about 16,000 polygons. We're going to come down here and say, why don't we just set this to 20% decimation? That's the default, and there you go. Okay, now this is still in ZBrush. You see it very faceted. Let's look at the poly and look at all of that stuff that's captured. You're capturing all of these main wrinkles, and this is looking pretty solid. Sometimes you can see the effect that you want if you divide it, but that screws up the border, so we're not going to really mess with that too much. And yes, there is some issues along the border there as well, but we can really choose to not care too much about that right now. You know, separate cloth is separate at the end of the day, so this isn't necessarily the deal killer for us. And if we're focused on a portfolio inside of ArtStation, this isn't something that's going to be, oh, they did that. They're not professional. If you do a great job with Marvelous Designer, you can be forgiven an enormous amount of sins. And my focus would be you do a great job inside of Marvelous Designer. All right. So let's just export this out. And I'm going to export this. I already did it to test it. And I'm creating these really long names, which is a little dangerous in some programs. So I'm doing this more kind of tongue-in-cheek for you. It's now 3D, and then it's now decimated. All right, and we're going to just save that out right over the top of that, which is pretty cool. And then anytime I'm dealing with Marmoset and trying to work all of these things, I always make sure I go into Maya, and let's just hide this. And I'm going to import that so I can smooth the normals, all right? So let's bring in the decimated one. Yes, and then I'm going to go into display, and I'll just, as a creature of habit, unlock, soften, okay, check that the soften is working okay, and yeah, I'm kind of happy with that. Now we're going to go into this one, select it, and then let's export this selection, the FBX, and I'll say low res decimated. There you go. All right, now we'll come into Marvelous Tool Bag, and let me kill the high there. I'm going to take my low, and just for the sake of this, I'm going to delete it. Okay, let's bring in the decimated ones. All right, looking pretty good. If you click it, you get to see the wireframe, you know, temporarily, so that'll work just fine for me. And if we come back into Maya, where'd Maya go? You can see it actually kept the UVs, right? Even though it's a little crazy on the inside, the UV border was kept and preserved, and that's great, because that means that this is something we could just throw in at the end when we really need to optimize something, or if we're creating levels of detail, this would be one of the ways that we create those specific levels of detail. All right, but as it is right now, there's no bake, there's nothing on this, so I actually don't even need to bake this again because the UVs are the same. all I really need to do is just apply this. So I'm going to select these guys, and I'm going to right click and say apply, and voila. There you go. We didn't even need to delete the other piece in there. But now all of that information is transferring over into my piece here at the 2K map. Looking pretty cool. Let's turn that off, on. There you go. All right, my friends, I just wanted you to see this extra little tool, this extra little process. There's a couple of different techniques and ways for you to get your model down in its low resolution. But keep in mind, low resolution is not going to get you a job. The thing that's going to get you a job, the thing that's going to help you get out there and get noticed, is if the Marvelous Designer work is spectacular. Of course, this is just a basic, but my hope, my goal here is to inspire you to go out there and reach more heights with tools like Marvelous Designer and to expand from the platform of Digital Sculptor into Character Artist or whatever's sitting there waiting for you. All right, have fun.